Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. Today we're taking a look at some meta trends and how they are influencing the market. Now with some of them there are things that are happening now or that have already happened. Those are some of the more obvious ones that you guys will have seen coming. But for others, there's a couple of cards here that are a bit more speculative, where they could be good in the future with upcoming support, or with how players think that the game is going to evolve. Let's get started. So first up should be a pretty straightforward one. It is Sprite Starter. So as I'm sure most of you know by now, Sprite actually took first and second place at YCS Lima last weekend. Over the last little while, I feel like most people have been looking at the top tier threats as being Kashtira, Labyrinth, branded variants, and then runic variants. And so I think a lot of people weren't really prepared for the Sprite matchup. However, the only thing that the deck lost on the last ban list was Sprite Elf, and while that is a really huge significant loss, the deck still has plenty of other things that it's able to do. Now after the YCS, Sprite are back on everyone's radar as a top tier threat, so everyone is getting prepared for the matchup and players are looking to pick up the cards for themselves to have the option of playing the deck if they so choose. Now in terms of market movement though, we haven't seen anything too crazy. At first I would have thought that Sprite Blues were going to spike, but they haven't done anything ridiculous yet. Rather, the notable price spike actually took place with Sprite Starter, which I think is arguably the best card from the archetype, special summoning any Sprite monster from directly out of your deck. Now going back a month or two, the card was only $4 or $5, especially since no one really thought that the deck was that great without Elf. Now, however, the card has more than doubled in price per copy, as it's now a solid $13 each on TCG Player. The card shouldn't be reprinted until the 2023 Megatins, and by then I do think that there is a decent chance that Sprite has been mostly rotated out of the format or hit further. So for now, Sprite Starter is just another meta card that you'll need to grab 3 copies of if you want to play the deck for the current format. Next up is a card that we've actually talked about so many times on Market Watch that I almost didn't want to discuss it. It is Rite of a Ramazir. So not only did Sprite take both of the final spots at YCS Lima, but both builds actually chose to use the Adventurer engine as well. The Adventurer Sprite deck in general hasn't been an especially popular variant of Sprite, but it certainly seems to be a solid build in light of Elf being banned. And of course, I'm sure that other decks this format will make use of the Adventurer token engine. I think Plunder Patrol is a really scary deck. We just haven't seen too much yet in terms of competitive results. So I feel like this card has just gone back and forth between being $30 and $60 ever since its release. And it just so happens that right now, after YCS Lima, the card is at one of its higher price points, currently sitting between $50 and $55 on TCG Player. Of course, this jump is different because we're expecting the card to be reprinted in Battles of Legend Monstrous Revenge, which is set to come out in June. Now, technically, we only know that the card is going to receive a 25th anniversary printing, and theoretically, it might not be the type of reprint that makes the card widely accessible. For instance, in Battles of Legend Crystal Revenge, not all of the Starlight rares like the Exodia pieces were available in the set's core set as well, so it's completely possible that we will just get the rarity bump and no improved accessibility. I do think that that's unlikely though, so I'd still expect it to get that more accessible printing in the set. I just want to make sure that you guys know that as of right now, that increased accessibility isn't a guarantee. Up next, we have a card that is brand new from Maze of Memories. It's Excel Synchro Stardust Dragon. This card is a really cool generic level 8 Synchro monster. On Synchro Summon, it summons a level 2 or lower tuner from your graveyard. In addition, during the main phase as a quick effect, you can tribute it to summon a Stardust Dragon from your extra deck, and then conduct a Synchro Summon using monsters that you control as material. And for the rest of the turn, the Synchro monsters that you summon with this card's effect are unaffected by your opponent's activated effects as well. This can do a lot of really cool things, especially since even though you're summoning out the Stardust Dragon, you don't necessarily have to use it as a synchro material. If you happen to have enough other bodies on board, you could synchro summon using those instead and keep the Stardust Dragon negation live. But on top of that, I feel like even in the worst case scenario, you're just making a Baron de Fleur that is immune to card effects completely, which sounds really terrifying. Anyways, this card may not have a home yet or any sort of deck that is able to abuse it right away, but with Excel Synchron coming out in Battles of Legend Monstrous Revenge and Ringo Worm coming in Cyberstorm Access, there's some really good level 2 tuners coming out that will be able to help abuse this card. Right now, this card is only $18 on TCG Player, which is honestly pretty reasonable right now. It feels a lot like how Baron de Fleur was in Synchro Storm, where it's like the one good new card from an otherwise really not that great side set, and because of that I do think that Excel Starter Synchro Dragon has a lot of upward potential in terms of price over the next couple of months. It may not be a buy right now. I think you'll probably be able to grab them for around 12 to 15 after some of the set's initial hype has died down, but I'd keep your eye on this card and consider grabbing it sooner rather than later. On to the next one. The Gold Pride cards seem to have been getting a lot of attention ever since their release, even though the deck ultimately hasn't really done anything yet. With the Gold Pride merch all announced to be coming out later this year, this marks the first time that Konami has decided to go and make these products based on a TCG exclusive archetype so early on in the archetype's life, and that has led a lot of people to believe that the deck is going to be a strong meta contender in the near future. Therefore, even though we don't know what the next wave of support holds, people scramble every now and then to go pick up their copies of the Gold Pride cards before they go up in price any further. The Crowd Goes Wild is one of the main targets that people take a look at as a secret rare from Photon Hypernova, and it's pretty easy to see why, as you can use it to search for basically any Gold Pride monster from your deck, and then potentially special summon that monster to your side of the field as well. The card is currently sitting at around $10, which is still up from the $5 to $6 that it was at before, even though the deck hasn't done anything yet. Now this one is pure speculation, right? So I don't really have much that I can offer to you guys in terms of what I think you guys should do. Personally, I've been picking up the Gold Pride stuff whenever people at my locals pull it and they don't want it, so I'm slowly accumulating it, but I don't know for sure if it's going to be good. I guess we can only hope that Konami will give us another good TCG exclusive archetype and not cut off the support way too early the way they did with decks like Goatee and Mutants. This next one is a really obscure card. It's called Scrubbed Raid. This is a continuous trap that is seeing a bit of play in certain runic decks. During the battle phase, this card lets you discard a card to simply end the battle phase. So far, we've seen some runic decks that focus on milling out your opponent, turn to Messenger of Peace as a way to stop your opponent from attacking you, giving you more turns to mill them out with your runic cards. However, Scrubbed Raid is a potentially really strong alternative. While Messenger of Peace only stops monsters with 1500 or more attack points, Scrubbed Raid ends the battle phase altogether. Also, rather than making you pay 100 life points each turn, Scrubbed Raid just requires you to discard a card from your hand, meaning that even in a time scenario, this card can still be live. Scrubbed Raid only has one super rare printing from one of the old Duelist packs, and it's weird because I feel like every time I see this card it's always lightly played, and it's actually really hard to find a actual near mint copy. But because of this extremely limited availability, the card is now $8 each, and there are very few copies available on TCG Player. This one is kind of weird, but I don't think it's going to be a top tier threat or anything, especially since of all the runic variants that you could be playing, going with a pure runic build that actually focuses on milling probably isn't going to be the most competitive. With just the one printing, expect this card to be on Konami's reprint radar over the next couple of reprint sets, and if you do have some extra copies, you'll probably want to offload them as soon as possible. Next up, Hey Trunade is a card that I've seen people talking about over the last few weeks, but didn't actually gain much traction until recently. Hey Trunade is the modern version of Giant Trunade, which returns only set spells and traps on the field back to each player's hand. Now thinking about it, this is much more fair than Giant Trunade. Giant Trunade would let you bounce floodgates back to your hand so that you could play and then put your opponent under those same floodgates during the next turn. But this card doesn't get rid of those face-up cards. However, it's still a useful card against Trap Tricks and Labyrinth as a way to get rid of your opponent's back row cards that aren't chainable at that point in time, allowing you to play freely without fear of having traps flip face up on you. Now, of course, it's just for the turn, since they can just reset it the next turn, but depending on what deck you're playing, that might give you enough time to OTK your opponent, and this could also be an especially useful alternative if you don't really feel like you can play things like Lightning Storm or Evenly Matched. Anyways, the card has a couple of different holo printings. The original secret rares from Extreme Force are at $9, while the Megaton reprint secret rares are at $6. This card also got a holo printing from one of the advent calendars a couple of years ago. I think that's an ultra rare, which is about $5 each right now as well. Fortunately, the card has two non-holo printings that are still available for well under $1, so that's a budget option for you guys if you want to pick them up. Overall though, I haven't seen this card much in terms of tournament results. I don't really see it in any like top deck lists or anything like that. For me, I would sell the holo versions into the hype while it's here, as I'm expecting this card to come back down in price fairly quickly. And finally, there's one last card that I want to mention, and this one hasn't spiked yet, but I think it's a card that will go up a lot this upcoming week, Slacker Magician. This is a generic level 1 monster that is used in the OCG by the Pearly deck. It has a straightforward effect where once per turn it can't be destroyed by battle, and if your opponent activates something that targets this card, you get to negate the activation and destroy that card. Really simple effect here. With built-in protection, this card is really cool. The key point though is that it's a spellcaster. Now in the OCG, Pearly uses this since they play a lot of level 1 monsters, and since this is a spellcaster, you can set up Secret Village of the Spellcasters to block Herald of the Abyss and Ixie's Encore. The deck also uses Rainbow Bridge of Salvation, which can be discarded for the Pearly quick play spells and used to search for Secret Village, so a lot of really cool synergy and little combos that you can do with the Pearly deck. Obviously, we don't know yet just how impactful Pearly will be once it's fully here in the TCG, but now that the tech is known, expect a lot of players here to scramble and pick up the cards just in case. Slacker Magician is only $1, really affordable card for right now that people here aren't aware of, but it's only got one printing from way back in Cosmo Blazer. Even though it's just a rare, we've seen plenty of times where that's the card's only printing, right? Examples like Psybeast and Djinbuster come to mind, and those are both cards that have gotten extremely expensive even though they're only old rares. Make sure that you guys grab your copies of this card now, or at least dig it up out of your bulk, since I'm fully expecting this card to hit at least $5 within the next week or so. Alright guys, that is it for today. Hopefully this provides you with a bit more knowledge of what's coming up, and hopefully you can also use this to look at the way that we looked at things here and apply it to other cards in the future. The meta is always the biggest driving force behind modern day card prices, so it should be one of the main things that you guys pay attention to when you're buying and selling, even though you don't play that much yourselves. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch, please make sure that you hit that thumbs up button for me. Also make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what you guys think about the cards we talked about today and what other cards are trending on the market. And of course, if you haven't already, do make sure that you hit that subscribe button. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.